The puppy was shivering. Not from the cold, the Texas evening was mild, but from the way the girl held him, arms tight like she was afraid he might vanish if she loosened her grip. She stood at the edge of the long gravel drive, boots worn thin, eyes fixed on the house at the far end like it might bite. The mansion lights were already on. Luca's heart saw her from the porch. He'd just come back from checking the south pasture, dust still on his coat, when the motion near the gate caught his attention. People didn't wander onto his land by accident. Not anymore. Not since everyone in 3 counties knew who owned it. The richest cowboy in the region, the man with no family, the man who kept to himself. He walked down the steps slowly, not wanting to scare her. She saw him anyway. Her shoulders stiffened. She looked ready to bolt. I won't take much time," she said quickly before he could speak. Her voice cracked on the last word. "I just please." She knelt and set the puppy down on the gravel. The little dog immediately tried to crawl back into her arms. "No," she whispered, tears spilling despite her effort. "You'll be okay. He's good. He listens. He just needs food and—" She pushed the puppy gently toward him and stood, already turning away. "Please take my puppy," she said, not looking back. "I can't keep him." Lucas frowned. "Miss." She froze. "I didn't say you could leave," he said, not sharply, just firmly. She hugged herself. "I don't want trouble." "Then stop making it," he replied calmly. "Why are you here?" Silence. The puppy whimpered and pawed at Lucas's boot. He bent, scooped the little thing up easily, then looked back at her. "You're shaking," he said. "That's not about a dog." Her lips trembled. "If I stay longer, I'll lose my nerve." Lucas studied her the way he studied horses, looking past fear to see what was underneath. She was thin, tired, too young to look that defeated. "Who's after you?" he asked. "No one," she said too fast. "Who sent you away?" Another pause, then a whisper, "Everyone." The word landed heavy. Lucas turned and started back toward the house. She stared at him, confused. I said I'm leaving." He stopped halfway up the path and looked over his shoulder. "I heard you," he said. "I just didn't agree." She swallowed. "Sir, I only asked you to take the dog." He glanced at the puppy, who had already settled against his chest like he belonged there. Lucas's voice dropped, gentle but unmovable. "You stay too." Her breath hitched. "I can't." "You already did," he said. "You walked onto my land, that's a choice." She shook her head. "I don't have anything to offer." Lucas smiled faintly. "Good, neither do I." That night, she slept in the guest room with the puppy curled against her ribs, afraid it was all a mistake that would vanish by morning. But morning came. So did breakfast. So did a clean blanket. So did a quiet job feeding chickens, then helping the cook in the kitchen, then walking the fence line with Lucas at a distance that felt safe. Her name was Ellie. She didn't talk much at first. Lucas didn't push. He knew silence could be a language of its own, but piece by piece the truth surfaced. She'd grown up bouncing between relatives who never wanted her for long. When she finally found a place that felt steady, it came with conditions that made her stomach knot. When she said no, she was told to leave, with nothing but the clothes she wore and the puppy she'd rescued weeks earlier. "I thought he deserved better than me," she said one evening, watching the dog chase fireflies. "Someone who could keep him." Lucas leaned on the fence beside her. "You kept him when you had nothing," he said. "That says enough." The town noticed. People always did. First the whispers, "Why's she there?" Then the looks, "Is she after his money?" Then the assumptions. Lucas ignored them all. When someone finally said it out loud, he answered just as plainly. "She's family," he said. "That's all you need to know." Ellie cried when she heard that. Not loudly, not in front of him, just quietly in the barn, puppy licking her cheeks like he understood. Weeks turned into months. Ellie learned the rhythms of the ranch. Lucas learned how to laugh again, really laugh, when the puppy stole his hat or when Ellie teased him about being too serious. She stopped flinching when footsteps sounded behind her. She slept through the night. One evening, she stood on the porch where she'd once tried to leave. "I was ready to disappear," she said softly, "if you hadn't stopped me." Lucas looked out over the land. "Sometimes people don't need saving," he said. "They just need permission to stay." She smiled, eyes bright. The puppy barked, tail wagging wildly like he approved. And the richest cowboy in Texas learned something he'd forgotten long ago. That the best things don't knock politely. They arrive shaking, afraid, and asking only for a chance. Life didn't suddenly turn perfect. It turned steady. That was the difference. Ellie stayed careful at first, like someone waiting for the floor to give way. She asked permission for everything, where to put her boots, when to feed the puppy, whether she could help in the kitchen even when no one had told her not to. Lucas noticed. One evening, after she'd asked for the third time if it was all right to sit on the porch steps, he said gently, "Ellie, you don't need to ask to exist here." She froze, then nodded, eyes shining but brave. "I'm learning." The puppy, she'd started calling him Rusty, grew fast. Too fast. His paws were always too big for the rest of him. His ears never quite decided which way to flop. Lucas pretended to scold him when he tracked mud through the house, but Ellie caught him sneaking treats when he thought no one was watching. The ranch hands warmed to her slowly. Not everyone trusted a quiet girl with a sad past and no papers to speak of. But Ellie worked harder than anyone. She listened more than she spoke. And when old Miguel twisted his knee, she was the one who sat with him through the night, changing compresses and reading aloud because he hated the silence. "That girl's got a good heart," Miguel told Lucas the next day. "She ain't passing through." Lucas already knew. Trouble came, as it always does, from outside. A man showed up one afternoon in a dusty sedan, asking questions at the gate. Said he was looking for a girl who owed money. Said she'd run off with something that didn't belong to her. Ellie saw the car from the barn and went pale. Lucas didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten. He simply stood beside Ellie, one hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "She's under my roof," he said, "which means she's under my protection." The man scoffed, until he saw the way the ranch hands quietly stepped closer, until he understood exactly how alone he was. He left. Ellie didn't breathe until the dust settled. "I thought you'd send me away," she whispered. Lucas shook his head. "You don't return people like borrowed tools." That night, Ellie finally told him everything. About the place she'd run from, about the unspoken expectations, about how Rusty had been the only thing that made her feel human when everything else felt like a transaction. "I was scared you'd think I was using you," she said. Lucas smiled sadly. "I've been used," he said. "This isn't that." Spring arrived gentle and green. Flowers bloomed where Ellie had planted them near the porch, unsure at first if she was allowed to change the land. Lucas noticed and said nothing, until one morning he brought her more seeds. "Thought you might want these," he said. Her hands shook as she took them. "You're really letting me stay." "I'm really asking you to," he corrected. Months later, when the town held its summer fair, Ellie hesitated at the mirror. She hadn't been anywhere crowded in years. Lucas waited by the door, hat in hand. "No pressure," he said, "but you won't be alone." At the fair, people stared at first. Then they smiled. Then they stopped staring at all. Ellie laughed when Rusty won a ribbon for most spirited pup, and Lucas felt something in his chest loosen that he hadn't known was still tight. On the way home, Ellie looked out at the dark fields rolling past. "I used to think love meant being tolerated," she said, "or bought." Lucas slowed the truck. "Love means being chosen," he said, "every day." She nodded, leaning her head against the window safe. Years later, people would say the rich cowboy changed. that he softened, that he smiled more, that his ranch felt warmer somehow. But Lucas knew the truth. He hadn't rescued a girl and her puppy. He'd opened the door. And they'd both saved each other by staying. Time did what it always does when no one is watching. It stitched people together. Ellie stopped flinching when trucks pulled up the drive. She learned which floorboards creaked and which didn't. She learned Lucas's silences, too, the good ones when he was thinking and the heavy ones when old memories crept in after sunset. She learned how to meet those moments without fear. Sometimes she just sat beside him on the porch, Rusty stretched between them, the land breathing slow and wide in front of them. No questions, no fixing, just presence. That was new for both of them. Lucas, for his part, learned how to share space again. He hadn't realized how much of his life had been built to keep people at a distance. Big rooms, long fences, rules that made sure no one stayed long enough to matter. Ellie dismantled those walls without ever touching them. One evening, after a long day, Lucas found her in the old study, the one he never used, cleaning dust from the shelves. "You don't have to do that," he said. She looked up a little embarrassed. "I know, I just wanted it to feel lived in." He nodded slowly. "It does." That winter was hard. A late freeze killed part of the north pasture. Repairs ran long. Tempers ran thin. When Lucas came home exhausted and sharp-edged, Ellie didn't disappear like she once would have. She handed him coffee. "You don't have to be strong all the time," she said quietly. He stared at her, something unsteady in his chest. Then he sat, and for the first time in years he let himself rest. The town changed its tone. People stopped calling Ellie that girl. They started calling her by name. When the schoolteacher fell ill, Ellie helped organize meals. When a storm took out power on the East Road, she showed up with blankets and a generator without being asked. Belonging, it turned out, was contagious. One afternoon, Lucas found a folded paper on the kitchen table. Ellie stood nearby, hands twisting. "It's official," she said. "I found my birth records. There's a program I could go back east, get training, a job." Lucas felt the old instinct flare, to protect, to keep, to close the gate. Instead, he nodded. "What do you want?" She swallowed. "I wanted you to know first." They sat with it for days, weeks. Finally, Ellie spoke one night as they watched Rusty chase moths in the yard. "I don't want to leave," she said. "Not because I'm afraid anymore, but because this is home." Lucas's voice was rough. "Then stay." She smiled, tears bright but steady. "I will." Years later, a photograph hung in the hallway. Ellie standing on the porch, Rusty older and grayer at her feet, Lucas beside her, not towering, not distant, just there. The house behind them looked different then, softer, full. People would still say he took her in. But those who really knew the story understood something deeper. She didn't arrive asking for rescue. She arrived asking for safety, for her puppy, for herself. And a man who thought he had everything learned that the rarest wealth of all is this. A door opened without conditions. A place where staying is not a favor. And family is built quietly daily. By choosing each other again and again.